Hello, my dog lovers. Hi. Max doesn't like me to bring him to say hi, but I decided today that I'll bring him because he's one of the reasons why I've been inspired to teach you how to keep your dogs mobile and happy for many years to come. There is so much that we can all learn about exercise, mobility, and injuries. Some of you have been asking questions whether you're over-exercising your dog or not. I also would like to talk about leash walks and why they're just not sufficient to make sure that your dog will stay fit, how to prevent injuries, how to tailor fitness for every dog, no matter what size and age they are, rehabilitation, the hidden dangers of urban exercise and what people do in parks and on dog walks, mental stimulation through movement, how to exercise puppies and how to exercise seniors, how to recognize if your dog is in discomfort or pain. So buckle up, we have a lot to talk about. How much exercise dogs need for their size, their breed, their age. And my philosophy behind this is relatively simple. It's the same as in humans. We need our dogs to exercise as much or as little to keep them healthy. Now, some people misperceive that if they have a senior dog, they need to exercise less because their senior dogs get a little stiff and tired. And the problem is that when they exercise less, they actually become more muscle weak. They have sarcopenia or loss of muscle. That actually results in not only less mobility and less strength, but also joint issues and ligament issues, because when there is not enough stimulation, that can result in more inflammation, more friction in the joints, more likely injuries of the ligaments and muscles, because if they're not strong, they're much more prone to injury. Obviously, there are other components of keeping our connective tissue, our ligaments, our joints healthy and healthy for many years to come. Nutrition is super important, providing the body with all the building blocks, but also supporting the joints and muscles by providing supplements and support that are actually targeting the mobility side of life. I have come up with joint powder for dogs, which is a fermented mobility support for canines of any age. It has all the building blocks for not only joint building and joint lubrication, but also recovery and anti-inflammatory properties. Fermentation increases the bioavailability of products 7 to 10 times. And if you want to try joint powder, you can just find it at jointpowder.com. There are any specific exercise routines for high energy breeds like Border Collies and Huskies. And while I'm not a shepherd or I don't have sled dogs, again, the focus should be on keeping our dogs healthy and strong without injuring them. So, I like to push our dogs and I like to push myself at the upper limit of injury-free exercise. And that's the most important part. If your dog is injured, obviously you have to slow down and just kind of build up the exercise level over time with including, rehabilitation and supplements and laser and acupuncture and massage and all those different chiropractics, all those different modalities. But it's super important to kind of keep our dogs exercising at that, level where they don't get injured, but they become strong or they will maintain their strength if they're already strong. I hope it makes sense. Now, when it comes to Border Collies or Huskies, obviously they're highly active dogs, but some people mistake high energy with obsession. I have seen some Border Collies basically almost burning out and dying of burnout because they would be playing in front of their apartment building or a house with children all day long, and they would be throwing ball and the dog would be crazy all day long. And then eventually it would actually start burning out. I've seen that in practice. One of my very long-time client, John, had a Border Collie, and we met at the time when his dog was basically almost dying. Nobody knew what was happening. She was running fever. She stopped eating. And when he came to me, I asked John what the dog was doing. He said that she was basically running all day long. And when we just looked at that and just gave her some rest and restored her and gave her support and supplements, minerals, vitamins, electrolytes, omega oils, she actually became better and healed fast. But, until then, John really didn't understand why this was happening. And we sometimes need to see things from a very simple perspective. We always try to, not always, but often we try to diagnose some sort of serious, complicated disease. Why? The answer is quite simple. So just remember that. So border collies, again, if you take a ball and throw a border collie ball for 45 minutes or 2 hours, they'll be probably running for 2 hours. But it doesn't necessarily mean that this kind of one-sided exercise is good. It's like in people, like if people overdo certain type of exercise or movement, they are more likely to get injured. We know that the tennis elbow is called tennis elbow for a reason. Or, when you run, runners have issues with knees, and, maybe ultramarathon runners have issues with certain injuries. But again, I'm not a physical therapist. I just want you to understand that the most important part with exercise is actually variety of different exercise. Hiking, playing, walking, a little bit of retrieving, ball playing, that's fine, even frisbee, but not too much, because if you do, dogs can overdo it. Second, if your dog is, let's say, retrieving frisbees and doing all the crazy stuff that you see on TikTok or Instagram, you have to really make sure that your dog will be checked on regular basis by a chiropractor, by a physical therapist, making sure that you know and understand how to determine whether your dog has gotten injury or not. What are the safe activities for senior dogs? Well, I think that walking, uphill walking, water walking, swimming, all those are really amazing exercises. Again, just try to make your dog move often. At least 2 walks a day, and maybe 3 is great. But if your dog is a weekend warrior, and if they don't really exercise during the week, and then they go for a weekend and you go for a really large hike, it may not be enough for them to maintain the strength, and they will start getting injured. If you are working 9 to 5, or if you can't walk your dog on a regular basis during the week, I recommend you getting a good dog walker that walks maximum 2, 3, 4 dogs on a dog walk. Don't get a crazy dog walker situation when there's 10 or 15 dogs going on a dog walk. It's a mayhem. It's not something that I would recommend doing because it's just injury waiting to happen. So again, with senior dogs, make sure that they get good nutrition, ideally natural food, raw or cooked, omega oils, minerals such as green, feel good omega, and joint powder to make sure that they have all the building blocks, and to then exercise them. Also check their back, check their joints, make sure that you work with a chiropractor, physical therapy, massage therapist, acupuncturist, veterinarian to ensure that they are okay. If you're wondering how you can safely exercise brachycephalic dogs, short-snouted dog, like pugs or bulldogs, that is a good question. Understand your dog's limitations. I don't really have a particular recommendations of how much your dog should exercise, but be mindful. If your dog gets tired or if they start lying down and resting, that may be a sign that you have overdone it or they have overdone it. So again, it's really hard to determine. Every dog is different. Every short-nosed dog's endurance is different. Airways are different as well. But be mindful and see if your dog starts resting or seems to be overheating, especially when it's hot, when the weather is not really cool enough for dogs to feel comfortable and be in the safety zone. So I think that I would start even further away from exercise, and that means diet. Dogs that are overweight most of the time are on kibble. And remember that kibble is 3 to 4 or 5 times more calorie dense than natural home cooked or raw food. And dogs, have stomach receptors that tell them, hey, I'm full or I'm not full. And if they eat kibble, the fullness is actually not registered because dogs can eat much more than if they had food in the original form. So the first thing that you want to do is to start feeding your dog cooked or raw homemade diet with vegetables. And you can go to some of my courses, go to my website. There's also a recipe maker that you can find. There's also a book by Dr. Karen Becker, my colleague and friend, and Rodney Habib that will give you a lot of information how to feed your dog. Now, once you start feeding non-processed, non-dehydrated food, your dog will start naturally losing weight. Exercise. Start gentle walks, and then maybe a little longer walks, uphill walking. Make sure that your dog doesn't get injured, but starts exercising more and burning more calories. So it's always about a balance. Like if you have a dog on kibble, and especially when there's a lot of carbohydrates and so on, dogs also get metabolic syndrome. They also have metabolic disease when they are on this food, similar to people. And it's super important for you to address food and then start exercising. I really like walking, hiking, playing, off-leash walking, definitely. If you have your dog on leash all the time, they will not exercise enough to lose weight unless you do really long walks, like 20,000, 40,000 steps, which is too much for most people. But if you are okay with it, great. If you're not, then you have to find off-leash places and ensure that your dog gets more exercise and also plays with other dogs. I would not be throwing a frisbee with an overweight dog. There's injuries and overexertion, overheating. Just keep in mind diet and movement and regular movement. And if you can't do it, get a dog walker, get an aunt or someone who's retired and doesn't have a dog, would like to have a dog, but can have them full-time. Make connections. People often ask me, how can they prevent the weekend warrior injuries when their dogs are sedentary during the week and then they take them out and they get injured? Well, it's simple and not simple. I understand that some dogs do not do a lot during the week because people have 9-to-5 jobs. They can't really walk their dogs as often. But I do feel that some of you may find a time in the day, maybe getting up earlier or not watching TV as often and going for a walk. Maybe listen to podcasts and go for a walk. And if you can't, I would say that another option is to find a friend or retired person who would like to have a dog, but they can't have a dog on their own full time. So, you can make connections with your neighbors and friends. I always felt that it would be great to have some sort of forum or some sort of club where people actually find each other, like a dating site for dogs, where dog walkers would connect with dog lovers and get their dogs walked more often. So the weekend warrior syndrome and injuries can be prevented only by exercising dogs more during the week and doing it mindfully so you don't overdo it. So there's too much or too little exercise. Should we be taking any special precautions when exercising puppies? Absolutely. Puppies are in a very fast growing stage of their life. It's super important to be mindful of that. What I experienced in practice is that people worry about exercising too much, too often. And I usually like to recommend mimicking what they would do in nature, meaning that they would play, they would run around, they would go for short walks and trot and run a little bit. But I would also be very mindful not to take them for long hikes, meaning every dog is a little different, but I would not be going beyond 2-3 kilometers initially when they're growing. So when they get about 6-7 months old, they can go for a little longer walks. But the general rule of thumb is let dogs play, socialize them with other dogs. Do not take them on a bike ride. Do not jog with them until they're about 1 to 1.5 years of age. I would jog with dogs, but I would not bike with dogs ever because they often get overexerted and it's not really that healthy for them. Even the ones that can keep up with you, it's not really great. Remember that growing dogs have open growth plates, which are much more prone to fractures or injuries. The growth plate is basically a very soft area between the main portion of the bone and the joint portion of the bone. And if you overexercise a dog, the growth plate can separate. So this is super important for you to be mindful of. But if your dog plays and trots around and goes on short to medium-sized walks, it's absolutely fine. Off-leash exercise is important. Just remember that not exercising your puppy at all leads to weakness and joint issues and ligament tears and all that. You have to actually put certain degree of healthy stress on the joints. Otherwise, they will not get strong. Some people are asking how can they safely introduce their dog to high-impact activities like running or agility training. I'm not an agility person. I admired all those people who are doing agility, and I think that dogs have fun and it's great. You just have to be more mindful to gradually build up the exercise. I would highly recommend for any agility person to understand and know how to examine the body very well. Dr. Laurie McCauley has several courses on that topic. You can also just kind of run your hands through the spine, see if there are any twitchy points and if your dog is actually turning back or reacting, responding to pressure on the back, examining the muscles and knees and feet and making sure that your dog's nails are trimmed and all that. But ultimately, like with any form of exercise, you have to gradually build up the strength. I would not go too intense at the beginning and kind of be ready that injuries will likely happen and that you have to have the right experts by your side. Chiropractors, physical therapists may want to invest into laser treatment. And again, Dr. Laurie McCauley has a great course on how to use laser treatment at home. I found it extremely beneficial. A laser doesn't only reduce pain and increases healing, it also promotes formation of stem cells. Some people are wondering, what are the risks of overexercising dogs with short legs or straight legs, and how to prevent joint issues and ligament tears and back pain and so on? To be honest, it is a big challenge because we humans have bred dogs with sight on maybe certain work or certain look and have forgotten about the functional aspect of their bodies. Dachshunds were originally bred for going into dens, fox dens, badger dens, and that's why they have short legs. But, if you look at Dachshund's life today, very few will be doing the work that they originally bred for. Therefore, you just have to be mindful. I always say, make sure that you have a good chiropractor, that you do the right level of exercise, that you do walk your dog, but don't, let's say with Dachshunds, don't let them jump up and down to high steps or beds and so on, because that can really injure their backs. Underwater treadmill, doing core exercising, balancing. Go to the website of FitPaws and look at the exercises and the equipment that they have there. And I have not been paid to recommend FitPaws, but they are great in promoting and selling different tools, how to keep your dogs healthy. But ultimately, you have to modify your short-legged dogs or straight-legged dogs exercise depending on what they can handle and what they shouldn't. And maybe talk to Dr. Laurie McCauley and take her courses and ask her questions, because she's the expert on exercising dogs with short and straight legs. Many people think that when they get their dogs tired, that they're actually better behaved. My experience is that when I take dogs on walks and hikes and play dates, all that is really beneficial for their emotional health and well-being, and they definitely will be less misbehaved. However, some people think that when they go to a park and throw a ball or frisbee for half an hour or an hour, their dog will be better. And what I've seen is that dogs actually become more obsessive. They become really almost like machines, and they can get injured. Also, they become more hyper. They sometimes kind of dominate the scene. I know a person who would be basically throwing a ball all day long from the desk when they were cooking. All day long, they would be actually throwing a ball. And that's something that I do not really recommend, because we have to have some boundaries around this issue. And it doesn't mean that we have to succumb to our dog's requests all the time. If you live in an area that has cold winters or hot summers, it can be difficult to get our dogs exercise properly. I have a friend who lives in Mexico with 2 dogs, and she's saying that they don't even come out for part of the year because it's so hot. And some of you who live in Canada and other places that are really cold, obviously winters can be challenging, especially when the temperatures drop below a certain level. So my suggestion is, if you have dogs that live in hot climates, try to exercise them early morning, late evening, take them for swims. I do not recommend exposing them to the midday sun, but it may be a good idea to just kind of create a regime that still includes exercise. When it comes to winters, obviously when it's really, really cold and your dog's feet could get frostbites, then I would recommend, maybe playing games at home. Make sure that the floors are not too slippery, but making sure that they do get some sort of exercise. If you have a treadmill, you can try to make them walk on a treadmill. That probably wouldn't work for many dogs. So be careful. Also, underwater treadmill or indoor swimming may be a good replacement of exercise if you live in cold climates. But generally, I would try not to limit exercise in those extreme temperatures. What I've noticed is that as a vet with 30 plus years of experience, I've seen dogs getting injured often in spring. I've seen that dogs get often injured in spring. And my general impression is that it happens because they sit on the couch the whole winter and then they go out and they're weak and get more likely injured. So just be careful. Make sure that you maintain your dog's exercise throughout the whole year if possible. And most of us do not live in extreme temperatures. So I think that it's more about our comfort and what we think we could do. But, generally, I think we can manage. What do you think? Let's talk about injury prevention. I know that many of you are wondering how you can prevent craniocruciate ligament tears in dogs and sprains and lameness and joint issues and so on. The most common belief is that these injuries happen when we overexercise your dog or our dogs, or when we slip or slide. My understanding of ACL or craniocruciate ligament injuries in dogs is a little different. It actually starts relatively early when dogs are bred, number one, but also there has been a very close link to spaying and neutering. Dr. Michelle Katzler, my colleague and friend, has done research that suggests and actually has proven that neutering and spaying actually leads to increased rate of craniocruciate ligament injuries. And the mechanism of this is really interesting and kind of surprising. When dogs get spayed and neutered, their luteinizing hormone that normally stimulates the gonads to produce testosterone elevates like rapidly and greatly. And the elevation of luteinizing hormone leads to inflammatory changes in the body. Now, there are receptors in different tissues all over the body, including the ligaments and cranial cruciate ligament area and the joints. So when the luteinizing hormone targets the receptors in, let's say, the knee, in the stifle joints of dogs, it causes inflammation. And the inflammation leads to gradual erosion of the tissue and eventually a tear. So see it as in Czech, in my native language, we say that we use a pitcher for a long time, but at one point the handle breaks off. And the same thing happens with the ligaments. There's a gradual erosion and eventually it leads to tear. It can be slip or slide, or dogs jump up and suddenly they yelp and they tear the ligament, but it is not just that accident. It is a process that happens. So what do? You can prevent or reduce the chances of cruciate ligament tears by not neutering and spaying dogs the conventional way, either do hormone-sparing sterilization, or you can just leave your dogs intact if you're responsible and if you don't let them breed just uncontrollably. This is an official recommendation of the World Small Animal Veterinary Association from 2024, and they basically do not suggest the conventional spaying and neutering. So this is one way to reduce cruciate ligament tears. Another way to reduce ligament tears is to obviously exercise your dogs mindfully, be mindful and reduce injurious activities such as jumping high up or a repetitive activity that is too frequent, like ball retrieving for 30, 60 minutes or longer. And just kind of monitor your dog and make sure that they do a variety of exercises. Obviously, genetics play a role. So if you are a breeder, be mindful of the predisposition of cruciate ligament tears. But once again, we have seen the most common denominator besides breed being the fact that dogs are neutered and spayed and have much higher predisposition to tears. What are the first signs of arthritis? Well, changing their behavior, that may be a first sign. Second sign is chewing and licking in certain areas around the joints, or chewing the back or rolling on the back. Sometimes may be a sign that there are some inflammation and signs of arthritis. How can we prevent joint issues such as hip dysplasia or elbow dysplasia and osteochondritis, which is separation of the cartilage of the joint? My general experience is that dogs that are fed processed food and grow fast, have calorie excess in the early stages of their development and growth, are more prone to hip dysplasia. Now, I have been quite surprised that when I started recommending raw diet and homemade cooked diet, that I have stopped seeing hip dysplasia in my patients as often. I would say that there was a dramatic reduction, maybe 80–90% reduction in hip dysplasia. And even though we know that hip dysplasia is genetically predisposed, we also know that the epigenetic factors or the environment and food and diet does play a role. I generally recommend not spaying and neutering dogs the conventional way because we know that hip dysplasia, ligament issues, joint issues are related to dogs being spayed and neutered and the elevation of luteinizing hormone. Another way to prevent your dog from having joint issues is to provide the general building blocks, the essential building blocks that your dog can't make. That means minerals, vitamins, omega oils. And if you have a dog that is likely to have joint issues because of their breed and predisposition, please make sure that you check joint powder in the equation as a supplement for joint and ligament and muscle support, because it provides 13 different ingredients to keep your dog's joints strong and also build them up strong. So that's something that you may want to check. If you're wondering whether you should stop certain activities in dogs with arthritis, my view at the issue is relatively simple. You cannot under-exercise your dog and cannot over-exercise your dog. The most important part is to provide the right nutrients, the essential support, supplements such as the Fabulous 4 that we've been recommending, and also joint powder for dogs. Or if you are suffering from symptoms of arthritis and inflammation of joints, joint butter is actually a good product. When it comes to exercise, it's really good to continue walking and strengthening, working with a physical therapist, chiropractor, exercise and rehabilitation specialist, and make sure that you do walking, still do some sort of water walking if you can, and generally strengthen your dog's joints, muscles, and core. I really like Dr. Lori McCauley's programs, McCauley, that's her name, and she's a board-certified rehabilitation and exercise specialist. Again, be mindful. Do not under-exercise and do not over-exercise. And learn from trusted resources and make sure that you do not let your dog just kind of sit on the couch and do nothing, because that's the worst case scenario. Even for us humans, if we stop moving and exercising, that's the beginning of the end. So just remember that. Laser therapy is a good method to help your dog if there are injuries or recovery post-surgery. My general experience has been that cold laser is an amazing method of recovering your dog from injuries and surgery. My dog Pax, who was injured and is now absolutely fine, had laser and has had laser on regular basis for about a year. I use it as a maintenance now, making sure that any injuries that he did have as a result of him being neutered and affected by the muscle loss and inflammation in his joints are not coming back, and laser is part of my treatment regime. Obviously, there are some other ways of reducing inflammation and prevent injuries. Omega oils, Feel Good Omega is what I give him. And also joint powder, which is a 13-ingredient fermented joint and mobility support that many of you like and appreciate, and I do too, to be honest. So that's all about laser today. If you're wondering how to use laser, you can go to my website at petertobias.com and look up the word laser. There's an interview with board-certified rehabilitation specialist, Dr. Lori McCauley, who is an amazing teacher and has tons of materials on the topic. The last but not the least topic that I would like to talk to you about is the use of harnesses versus collars. Collars can be rather dangerous when it comes to dog health, because if you think of the neck, there is a lot of important nerves and blood vessels and thyroid gland. And many dogs actually have neck injuries. So over the 30 years of my practice, I've seen so many dogs having neck-related injuries and people don't even recognize it. Sometimes dogs lick their feet and people think that those are allergies or allergic reactions, but it is actually neurological symptom from a neck injury. Hypothyroidism, and especially in large dogs that pull, is actually much more common than smaller dogs. The vagus nerve, it originates from the neck and it governs the heart, the lungs, the digestive tract. And if you injure a dog's neck, it can get some other issues internally without you even knowing that's related. So if you can, and if you believe what I just said, please use a harness. My favorite harness for packs is Perfect Fit from the UK. We have it on our website at petertobias.com. You can check it out and see the comments and reviews. When it comes to leashes are another contentious issue. Retractable leashes are very common, very popular. However, the spring applies pressure on your dog's body, which can cause, again, injuries and issues. Also, when people press on the brake, dogs will stop suddenly and can get injured, and often do. So how did I solve it? I found this amazing lady, native lady in Canada, who makes an incredible leash. It's called Gentle Leash, and it's made of natural materials. It's handmade. It's super strong and it's very light and shock absorbing, and you will love it. If you want to check it out, again, go to my website at petertobias.com and look for Gentle Leash. And that's all for today. If you have any questions about mobility, about injuries, arthritis, supplements for joint mobility, let us know. You can contact me through the website at petertobias.com or comment in this post, in this video. And I hope that you will subscribe. I really enjoy working with you. I really enjoy supporting you whenever I can. Some people ask me whether I want to retire. And to be honest, I don't, because just being with you and knowing that I can make a little bit of difference makes me so, so happy. And also, I know how you feel because I live with the dog, and Max is just the best teacher on so many levels. And he's taught me a lot about mobility and injuries. And I hope today I have passed at least some of the bits and pieces of information onto you, and that it'll help you to keep your dog healthy and mobile for many years to come. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day. Take care.